Hello, welcome to Senior Center Television. We are here talking to people about their war stories. My name is Nell Dunlap, and sir, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Charles Robert Laudie, Laudie. I go by Bob, my middle name, and I was born in Independence, Missouri, September 8th, 1919. I always wanted to learn to fly, be a pilot, and I read someplace, this is during, the Depression is still basically in the 30s, because this was in, I read that you could get into the Army Air Corps, Navy Air Corps, or Marine Air Corps if you had 2 years of college and passed the physical.
Okay.
And so I worked my way through 2 years of college.
With the purpose of being a pilot.
Well, that was my ultimate goal. And then passed the physical, and this was in 1941, in the spring of 41, and was waiting to be called. Then I left Kansas City area and went to Burbank, California, and went to work at Lockheed Aircraft.
Because you wanted to continue to have some sort of involvement with planes while you were waiting?
No, I didn't have any money to do anything with planes. By that time, by the way, you had Pearl Harbor happened, of course, and I did get then a telegram from the Army saying to report January 6th to the recruiting office in Los Angeles. Then they took us by train to Higley Field, which is now Williams, Arizona. It was just being built, and that's where you got. We were there about 2 weeks. Boot camp, which meant marching and drilling, and then we were sent to Phoenix, Arizona, to Thunderbird Field.
And about how many fellows were with you in that? Was it the same group of people that stuck with you?
Pretty much with the same group at that time. And it was there that we started flying Stearman plane, which is a two-wing plane, kind that's used for crop dusting today, or had been. And
do you remember your first time?
First time I went up, it was with a civilian pilot. That's what our instructor. And of course, we sat in the first cockpit, and he sat in the second one. And we got up to around probably 8,000 feet, and we had a tube that you talked through. It wasn't real communication. And he said, tighten your seatbelt real tight. I did. I had no idea. My first time up on a plane, next thing I knew, we were in a spin, headed to the ground. And it scared the devil out of me. I was so angry that he did that without warning me that he was going to do that. And after that, everything was okay. But
and so he was a civilian pilot.
He was, in those days, they had civilian pilots.
Do you think, do you know why that? Do you think the Army pilots were in the war, so they didn't have time?
Well, at that time they were expanding and building airfields so fast that they, just couldn't get instructors that fast. And this fellow Frost, that was my instructor, had been an old barnstormer pilot, which meant that he used to fly Stearmans to various towns and to fairs, usually, of some kind, or whatever. And then for a fee, he would take them up around the field and back. And that was the way he made his living. But he could fly that plane very well. Anyway, we got it 60 hours of training there. I soloed, I think, probably on my 10th flight or whatever.
And so it would just be you and the plane?
On the solo.
On the solos,
Yeah. When he would go up, he would give you different, you learn to do snap rolls, to do slow rolls.
Can you describe what those are?
A snap roll, you follow the torque of the engine and you go to the right. You see them do it when a plane does a complete swirl around, turn. A slow roll is against the torque, so you go slower. And the biggest job there is keeping the nose up on the horizon. and loops. I used to love to do loops.
Is that, how do you do a
go
loop?
down,
You go
and
down?
you get up a lot of speed and then go clear up on over and come back around. I love to do that. And of course, while there at Thunderbird Field, there was a film crew that came in to do the film Thunderbirds, which I have a copy of. It's Jean Tierney, and she was so beautiful, and Preston Foster, and they made the film, part of it there while I was there. They took a lot of pictures of us, but I'm in one of them with about 5 or 6 other guys. All you see is our backs running, but it's only in it for that long.
But still.
And they put the film crew off to one side and said, "You're not to go over there, cadets." Well, that's all I needed. I sneaked over there with another fellow one afternoon late and knocked on her door, and here she came to the door, so beautiful. And I told her a fib. I told her we were reporters for the base newspaper. There was no base newspaper. We were there probably 30 or 40 minutes, and to this day I don't remember what we talked about because I had my face in her face.
That's
Anyway,
so incredible.
Well, anyway, graduated 60 hours and sent then to Minterfield, which is near Bakersfield, California, at Taft, California.
Right.
And we were given, again, ground school instruction in terms of instrument flying and so on, and flying and starting and so on, and got it. And it's a heavier aircraft, and it had a canopy, 2-seater.
Okay.
About halfway through there, they pulled a bunch of us out and said, we don't have enough navigators and bombardiers and glider pilots. You have your choice. Well, we didn't want gliders. We said we'll take navigation. They sent it.
And could you tell me a little what those different positions? So I don't even know what a glider pilot is.
A glider. You've seen gliders.
I probably.
Yeah,
I guess
okay.
so.
Well, the pilot of a glider would be that.
So they don't have an engine, or what?
No, they don't have an engine. And anyway, we ended up. I ended up going on to we all wanted navigation, but they said there's a delay on that. We can put you in bombardier right now. We went to Albuquerque, to Kirtland Field there, and there you got Brown School instruction on bombing theory.
Okay.
And different kinds of bombs and all this kind of thing. And then you had to actually drop so many bombs at night as well as daytime.
Oh my!
And
so
they
where?
Took you up, and these were practice bombs.
Right. Where would they do that? Just the base was large enough that there was
out in the desert. There'd be some circles on the ground, and you had to hit within a certain. I had 200 feet was a circle.
Wow! And what kind of equipment was there to do that?
Well, you had the Norden bomb sight, which is again what you had to know about how it worked, and. And how to use it and so on, and the information to put in it. And so you dropped, you'd go up with 20 bombs, you'd drop 10 and be 2 of you. And while you were dropping yours, the other fellow was laying on his stomach in the back with an opening there and a camera taking pictures of your hits. And
so they could see how you were doing.
And you did that for the other fellow too. And we dropped a lot of bombs, practice bombs. They're 10 bombs.
Right.
They were loaded with sand.
Okay.
But they had a charge in the tail of the bomb, so when it went off, it made a puff of black smoke.
Okay. So that's what they could take a picture of.
And at night, it would also make a flash. Okay. And that's what you did. And when you graduated, you were a second lieutenant.
Okay.
And they sent us to Barksdale Field, and there we crewed up B-26s, which is a 2-engine bomber.
Okay.
And we picked up our new plane in Savannah, Georgia, and flew from there to Presque Isle, Maine. There were 6 of us.
So, okay. When you flew, was that usually how it was? There'd always be 6?
Yeah, you always had.
We
always had.
I
was a pilot. I was a navigator bombardier.
Right.
And I did fly in the co-pilot seat and flew the plane in the air, but I wouldn't try it to land it or anything.
Right.
Then you had the radio gunner. He was radio man, but gunner on the when we were over enemy territory.
Right.
Then you had a gunner period. Okay. Then you had the engineer gunner,
Mm-hmm.
and
That's
we went over with co-pilots, but they needed first pilots, so they took them away.
okay, because there
Okay.
weren't enough to have a
They didn't have
co-pilot on
enough
all of them.
pilots. They needed the co-pilots as pilots.
Right.
And so you were
So
6. We went over
right,
with
so
7,
you're
but you ended up with 6.
okay, all right.
Okay.
So that's how you flew to Maine with your new planes.
We had
your
7 of us
B-52s.
flying to Maine,
Okay.
stopping on the way. We had 30 days to get there. It didn't take 30 days to get there. From there we flew to Goose Bay, Labrador, and there we stayed a few days waiting for the weather to break and studying, because our next stop was going to be our worst one, and that was to Greenland. Because once we got over the halfway mark, we were committed,
Mm-hmm.
because we only had 5 hours flying time.
Right.
And we had to hit the right fjord. And I breathed a sigh of relief when we hit the right one, because you're changing heading all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're up there near the North Pole, and so I was giving new corrections.
Right,
as we
and the
went
pressure
along all
was
the time.
on you.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
very
as the
definitely.
navigator.
Anyway, we hit it, and we
Mhm.
landed. You're about 10 miles up the fjord with mountains on both sides going up there to 18, 20,000 feet or higher, and we didn't have oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were there for a few days and came back down. You land on a steel mat from the water going up the moraine, the side of the glacier deal.
Wait, what is
Yes.
that? What do you mean? What is?
The moraine is the rocks, and
Okay.
things on the side of a glacier, for
Okay.
where the glacier is
And so they
melting.
had put a
that.
metal plate into
They had
it.
a metal, no, it was a metal deal, mat.
Mm-hmm.
You know how you've gone over bridges where they had just a steel mat,
Yeah,
and
sure.
you can see down through it?
Yeah.
That's the way this was.
Whoa.
And you landed going
Goodness.
uphill.
Okay.
Starting at the water, you landed uphill. And then you left it by flying back downhill,
Okay.
getting speed to get out of there, and back out the fjord.
And these
then
were
we went over the top of the ice cap there,
Okay.
that southern end.
and these were stops you were making. Were you refueling, or would you stay there for a little while,
You'd
or
refuel,
and
you'd be
eat and
there.
sleep?
Well,
and-
you had to wait until the weather was clear
Okay.
on your next stop,
Okay.
both over where you were and where you were going.
Right.
And our next stop was Iceland,
Okay.
and we landed at Keflavik, and we were there a few days till the weather broke in Scotland
Mm-hmm.
and over our base, and then we took off, and there were 29 crews of us, and we weren't as a group, but we did end up kind of like that, because you'd
Okay.
follow each other.
Right. Right. And were these
And-
guys that you had known from any of your training?
Some of them I knew, oh yeah,
Mhm, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You get to know them, yeah.
And you would have your same 7 or 6 person crew
Well,
all the
in,
time?
in that case, yeah, to get over there we
Right.
did. In combat, you didn't always fly with your own crew.
Okay.
Okay. A lot of them I did, but not all.
Okay.
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 And we joined the 323rd Bomb Group, which had been there about 2 weeks ahead of us. And they had made up in Tampa, Florida, and they had flown the southern route
Okay.
through the Azores and Africa
And they
and
also.
up into England. And
interesting.
we joined them
Okay.
over in England.
Okay.
And then we started flying missions.
Wonderful. So when you first got there, what were your accommodations like? Where were you
Well,
staying?
we were in it had been a British fighter base,
Mm-hmm.
and they had moved to southern England.
Okay.
And so we moved into that base, and we lived in an Eastern Huts. Had a little stove in the middle of it that had
Mhm.
basically, the British would give you a little handful of coal in the wintertime. But basically you kept warm with your clothing, the flight deck,
Right.
flight clothes, as well as you had 2 Army blankets.
Okay. And did
Yeah.
did you interact with British soldiers a lot, or were they
They
pretty
were
separate?
pretty much overseas.
Mm-hmm.
We pretty well had all the women to ourselves.
Nice work.
The saying was, I
Uh-huh.
guess you've heard it.
Probably.
overpaid, oversexed, and over here. That was what was said. I shouldn't have said that.
Yes, you should have. That's good.
But that was a saying that the British used.
Yeah.
You'd see most of the British were over in India or over in other places. In the covering the British Commonwealth, their colonies and so on.
Right.
Especially North Africa, they were there. And they moved us in, and of course kept adding more and more groups.
Right. So
as we got organized.
So what was your first mission?
My first mission, I was the only one from Barksdale Field on it. I was flying with a different crew, one of their crew, and it was to an air base at Abbeville, France. And they had expected 50% losses. We didn't lose anybody. We all got planes shot up. It was a it was a German air base.
And how did you feel going out that they said 50% losses and then you were just supposed to go?
You see, before we got there, the 322nd Bomb Group, about 2 weeks before we got there, had used the plane, the B-26, down at ground level. Because in the Pacific, in order to keep under the Japanese radar, they were keeping them right on, skimming the water. And then rise up just ahead of the target to bomb.
Right.
And they tried that in England. They sent 11 planes out to go hit the, at Imoyden, Holland, to hit the German generators there for their U-boats. And they forgot that that's all flat land up there. Denmark and all that along there, Holland, all of that's just above the water. Well, the Germans had flak towers. Flak towers are they had mounted their guns up on higher, and it was like shooting skeet. Well, of the 11 that went out, they never made landfall. They all got back, but they were all shot up. 2 days later, they sent 10 out and never heard from them again. So when we arrived there, we were grounded. They weren't flying. Our CO, Colonel Thatcher asked Bomber Command if he could try it at 12,000 to 13,000 feet.
So above where
above
they would
the
be
ground.
able to shoot them.
Well, number one, it made extreme range for light flak, and for the heavy stuff, they couldn't fuse it down that low. You still were vulnerable. But we also had heavy. We always see the thing that hurt the heavies, the 17s and those.
Those are the bigger planes.
The 4-engine ones. They went into. They could make it 11-hour flight. We couldn't. 5 hours about our max.
Because they could carry more
gasoline.
gas.
They carry more gas. And they flew up around 30,000 feet, 29 to 30. Whereas we flew. We didn't have oxygen.
Right.
So that we kept under, well, the highest I've been up in the 26 was close to 18,000 feet, going over the tip of Greenland.
Right.
But anyway, Thatcher, they were expecting 50% loss, and as I said, we all got back.
Right.
We were strafing this airfield, bombing it, actually. And we went in around 12,000 to 13. But we had a lot of fighter escort with us, which is really...
Is that pretty standard? That was what they would always do?
Well, for us,
Yeah.
Well, the fighters would go in with the 17s and whatnot to the point where they had to go back and refuel. Well, from that point on, the 17s and 24s were vulnerable to fighters, German fighters. Right. And then what would happen, the fighter escort would go back, refuel, and then meet them on the way out, about where they had left them. Right, and come back.
And
but
so,
see, with
what
fighter
did they have? Sorry, you're going to tell me.
I'm going to say with fighter escort, as we had all the time with us, we never worried about fighters. They kept them out. You'd see dog fights out, but nothing enclosed.
Right.
That wasn't our problem.
They were
Our
so they were
problem,
sort of a barricade
they
around
were
you.
a barricade around us, guards.
Right, right. And then
But-
once they were out of fuel, there were no guards.
Well, in our case, they stayed with us. They could stay with us for the full 5 hours if it's what the flight was.
Right.
But the bad part for us was flak.
Mm.
That was guns shooting at us, 88
That's
millimeter.
what, guns shooting from the ground.
From the
usually?
ground, yeah.
Mm.
These shells would come up, and of course they're like a hand grenade in that when they would explode, these shells are pretty good size, you know. And when they would explode, you had all these metal fragments. That's what did the damage.
Right, right into the plane. Right
Yeah,
into the,
we'd come back with holes,
right.
and they'd patch them up. I had one that hit about this far from me, my head, and if I'd been just that much leaning forward, it would have, and it was a big piece. It landed over here in a bunch of metal, and I dug it out when we landed, and that
I
became,
saw it. Yeah.
and it became my souvenir.
Yeah, I can see. So before you left on your first mission, and you're 24 or something, and they
Yeah.
say 50%.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, they
what
didn't
do you-
tell us
they-
that.
they-
They
that
didn't
was
tell us
later.
that.
Okay.
They
Well, I
didn't
didn't
tell
know.
us.
Yeah.
It was afterwards I read it in General Mitch's book
Mm-hmm.
on our bomb group.
Overall, when you would be going out, I mean, maybe it's hard to generalize, but overall, were people, was it a spirit of camaraderie, like let's go get them, or was it where people? Did it depend? I guess probably on the guy, but
You see, the way a mission would start, is you would get up, if it was a morning mission, you would get up maybe at 5 o'clock, depending on what time the mission was supposed to be,
right.
and you would eat at the mess hall, and then you would go to this, it was kind of like a big classroom, only bigger than that. It was a big room, and you had seats to sit on, and you'd sit usually as crews. And then
Like you
up
sit
here,
with the people you were going to fly with.
Yeah,
Okay.
your crew, whoever
That's it.
you were flying with that day. And up on the stage platform would be, behind on the wall, would be a big map of England and the northern, France and all of the area, Holland and so on. And then it would usually start with the CO or somebody would be telling you what your mission was going to be, where you were going and what
Right.
you were going to be going after. Intelligence would tell you how many guns and where they were located and pretty much where they were. Because with that much aircraft around the clock, because the British bombed at night, we bombed in the daytime. And with the planes always over there, except for some movable ones that would be mobile, most of them were pretty fixed guns.
Right, so they'd know
They'd know.
where to go.
And so intelligence would tell us the route in and out to take to avoid as many guns as you could.
Right.
And then the weatherman would tell you what the weather would be apt to be over the target, over your place, over the fighter base, and these all had to be and hold for the 4 or 5 hours that you were going to be on the mission. And weather up there is pretty tough around Damon because you've got so many air currents that come. You get it from the Scandinavian areas one way, you get it from the south coming out of down in the southern part. You
hard
had
to
it
know.
You had it coming from Iceland and so on.
Right.
Toward you. So you had all these air currents, and so but that was the biggest problem because we couldn't fly as often as we would like because of the weather.
Right.
Yeah.
So how many missions did you fly out of that base?
We were told 25 when we got over there. We could rotate home. We all got 25, and they said 35. We all got 35, and they said 50. But this time we're through 43, and we're into 44. And about April of 44, morale's low. We've been losing guys and planes, and they brought General Marshall over, and he got us into the hangar and told us we'd like to let you go, but the big push is coming, meaning D-Day, although they didn't call it that then.
Right.
And we knew invasion was sometime was going to be happening because we were bombing everything we could along France and along the coast there, and so they gave us a week off. We had a big estate in southern England, and we got to shoot skeet, play golf, ride horseback. and hit the pubs. And then
Did that help? Did you guys do you feel like when you returned from that break you felt reinvigorated or?
well, it beat flying a
Yeah,
mission.
true.
So,
Yeah.
anyway, then when we got back, we started flying missions again.
Mm-hmm.
And so D-Day, I flew 2 missions that day. One in the morning at Utah Beach, just ahead of the landing. Everything was timed.
Okay.
We had to be there at a certain time. And unfortunately, the weather was such that we went in around 44 to 5,000 feet when we bombed there, which is
higher.
Which is not as high as used to. We were used to around 12,500, 13,000.
Okay. Oh, I guess I've seen
clouds
thousands.
were right down,
Yeah.
so the peninsula, the Cherbourg Peninsula, is long with mountains in the middle there. So after we bombed, of course, the Germans had all kinds of guns up here in the hills shooting, and they were shooting at us, of course.
Right.
And we were
so you had to be lower than you would have liked to.
Well, we were lower than we normally would have liked. But anyway, we dropped our bombs ahead of that. But I've never seen so many boats in the water in my life. They had boats coming from, everything was timed.
Right.
It's amazing how many boats. They had something like, I saw the count once, 8,000 or something boats in the water of all kinds. That landing was amazing.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Incredible. Anyway, I went on, finally ended up 73 missions.
Wow. And what was your second mission on D-Day, I guess, here?
The second mission was to Caen, France.
Okay.
The Germans, what
to
happened...
Caen, France?
Yeah.
What is...
Caen, France is down to... when you look at the mainland of France and the Cherbourg Peninsula that goes up, it's down to bottom there. Now, you had the northern beach that was hit was Utah. That's the one that we hit.
Right.
The next one was Omaha. The losses at Omaha they lost over 4,000 men that day. A lot of them drowned, because they couldn't bring the boats in to let them off because of the wave action, because it was stormy and high waves. So they had to let them off in the water when they'd be in water up to their chest, and here they had all their stuff on them.
Right.
They had to carry everything on them to last them for 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
And a lot of them would fall down, and unless somebody could help them up, they drowned.
So sad.
There were a lot of them that drowned. Okay. Now, the next beach was, and I forget, they had different names, but Swordfish was one. The British had the next 2 beaches. And then the Free French had the last.
Okay.
And the British and the French were supposed to cut that main road off from Cherbourg, from Caen, France, that went up to Cherbourg. So the Germans had Panzer Division at Caen.
Okay.
Just in the woods beyond.
And so they wanted to cut that road off so they couldn't
wanted to
get
cut them
up.
off. But the Germans had flooded the marshlands there, so the British and them couldn't get to that road. So we went to Caen, France to bomb that Panzer Division that was there. And that's why in the afternoon I went to Caen, France.
Right, so because the plans sort of had to change in the middle because they found out they had flooded.
Yeah.
So 73 missions overall.
Yeah.
And of are there, out of those 73, were there some that stood out as especially successful or especially difficult?
My 7th mission.
Okay.
We usually flew 18 planes to a box. You'd be 6 planes. You were in groups of 6. You'd have 3 here. And then you had 3 tucked under. So you wouldn't be in their slipstream of their thing. It made up a box of 6. And then they would all be flying on the lead one, which is usually where I was.
What do you mean they'd be flying on the lead one?
They would drop their bombs in a pattern.
Okay.
We pattern bombed.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
And we drop a pattern of bombs on whatever it was.
Okay, so you'd have your 6 planes, 3 up
6
here, 3 down here.
You had 3 and 3, and that'd make a box. And then here you would have 6 more making a box.
And then around those...
You'd have 3 of these 6s made 18. Okay?
Right, okay. And then around those you'd have your
No, you'd have fighters. That'd be
Fighters, that's
outside
what I mean.
around.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay.
And then you would have, in some cases, we had 36. We had 2 boxes of 18.
Wow.
Okay. So it depended on on what it was, what our target was.
Right. Right.
And on my 7th mission, there were 36 planes. Okay. And we were going to, oh gosh, where was it? Was going to? It was Cannes.
Mm-hmm.
And we were hitting the airfield there. And so we had 2 boxes of 18, and I was in Captain Morgan. I'd never flown his crew before. Mm-hmm. And we were in the lead plane. There were 2 18s,
right.
And we were the lead of the first 18.
Wow. So
we were the first off the field.
Right, and that's probably, is that a lot of pressure on you as the navigator of that first plane?
Yeah, but you don't think about it. It's just your job. Yeah, sorry. It's kind of like your job. You just do it. You aren't thinking much about it. You're a little, when you're being shot at, you're apprehensive a little bit. I'm sure the heart beats a little more and so on. But you're busy doing your job, Wow. Mm-hmm. So anyway, on that mission, we went into Cannes, and intelligence had told us that there would only be 3 guns down there shooting at us, and I only saw 3 flashes. I only saw 3 guns shooting. Mm-hmm. But after we dropped the bombs, and I had closed the bomb bay door, I leaned over to watch the bombs go down, and there was a flash on the ground, and I was fascinated by it because it was like a light globe down there that was round, and it stayed there as we're flying. That light stayed there. I should have known it was actually a 88 shell coming up that had phosphorus on the thing.
Oh, and so it was just getting closer, but it looked like it was just on the ground.
I thought it was just staying there. Well, it took it about 18 seconds for it to probably get up there, and it went through our left engine completely. And when I looked out, our whole engine was on fire. Everything, the engine was gone. Everything was on fire out there. One big ball of fire. I opened the bomb bay door real quick, ran back to the bomb bay. I had my English, British parachute.
What do you mean you're British?
Well, the Americans' parachutes were, you sat on them. They were, basically, they hung on your back here. The British, you wore a harness all the time. They had 2 snaps, and the parachute was what we call a chest chute, and it had 2 rings on it that you just snapped it on. Okay. And I had heard stories that they had 1 or 2. There had been stories of guys forgetting to put their parachute on and in the excitement jump out without it. Right. And that always kind of bothered me. Am I going to forget that chute? And I didn't. I had it on, and I had 1 leg out. I was going. When Morgan yelled, "Hang on," and he put the plane in the steep dive and put the fire out. Wow. We were lucky. Wow. So
like you were going fast enough.
I closed the bell. Well, we were in a steep dive.
Yes, right.
And I closed the bomb bay and went up in the co-pilot. Right above the co-pilot seat was a flare gun, and I shot off flares to attract the fighters around us.
So they would know to come follow you down, so they couldn't be shot at.
They knew that we were in trouble because we had left the group. Once you leave the group, you've lost your help, in terms of fighters around you. So I shot that off, and that brought a bunch of, 8 or 9 fighters right around us. And Morgan yelled at me what heading, and without thinking, I said 180 degrees, and then it hit me. That's toward Spain. You don't have that kind of gas. So I whirled around and said, no, 0 degrees. And then we headed out over the water, and we had that 120 miles basically to get back to England.
And these fighters were around you?
We had the fighters with us.
And when people were
every time,
shooting you?
Then the B-26 doesn't fly on 2 engines, so we decided to lighten the plane. I opened a little in the navigator's compartment was a little door that you could open down. You could actually use it to get in and out of the plane if you weren't too heavy. And the radio gunner came down, and he would tear things out, hand it to me, and I would drop it. Well, I'm down here right above the hole,
Yeah.
dropping it. Every time I dropped something, a fighter would follow it down to make sure it wasn't a guy in a parachute.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so I hadn't jumped out.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we're losing altitude. And this guy, I didn't know who him, the radio gunner, I'd never met him before, handed me my parachute. And my chest
So you didn't
pack.
have it on?
Well, I had taken it off.
Okay.
I had taken it off, so it wouldn't
Okay.
interfere with my
Okay.
doing. Okay. He handed it to me. I got it clear down there and was ready to drop it when it dawned on me, that's my parachute. I was so angry. I was angry. I looked at him, he had a grin on his face, and I thought, if I had my 45 here, I'd shoot that grin off your face.
That's unbelievable.
I was so angry.
That's. I mean, he was playing so he was trying to play like a practical joke on you.
Yeah.
Did you ever see him
Anyway,
again when you got back?
We became good friends
Oh.
afterwards, and not then, but
Right,
later
right.
when we used to have squadron reunions. Why, I got to know him, and we became good friends. Anyway, we had to crash on the coast. We couldn't get over the coast, so we crashed in.
Of England, the coast of England.
Well, there were two fields. They had hedges around. British fields weren't very big, and that plane it finally stopped. You know, your wheels up, of course. You're
Right.
crashing,
Yeah.
and three of us. There were three of us in the navigator's compartment. I'd opened the hatch above, and there were three of us there. Anyway, the three of us went out the top hatch. I helped a couple of them out up there. And you start running because you don't know if there's any planes going to catch fire. You still have
So
petrol.
you crash. So the plane comes in, and you jump out the top and jump off.
Yeah, oh, yeah. And you use the wing, jump down to the wing and then on down.
How
and
fast
then
do
you
you
start
think
running.
this plane is going?
Well, the thing that happened, you were all running, okay, except one guy. When we got ready to go on that mission, there was a captain who we called a ground cruncher. In other words, he wasn't a fly guy. He was the captain of the armor part. He asked if he could go along. So we had given him a parachute. We'd given him a seat dinghy, which is a little boat deal you can inflate.
Right.
And also we'd given him a Mae West. You can float with it. Anyway, we're all running and we hear this yelling, and we'd forgotten about him. And if you know you're going to crash, you take everything off that you can. You don't want anything to keep you from getting out.
Right.
Well, he hadn't. Nobody had told him to.
No.
And he was back there and yelling out the window, and we're yelling at him to get out and run. He said, I can't, it's tied to me. He had inflated everything, the parachute, everything. We had to go back, and fortunately the plane didn't catch fire.
Right,
It smoked,
right.
but it didn't catch fire.
Right.
And we had to go back and cut him loose so he could get out. But I'll bet he's having some great stories to tell his grandkids.
No kidding.
Anyway, we had landed in a British ACAC outfit because pretty soon, everybody in England that was of any age between so and so were in the service. Those beyond were doing something. Like the women were doing, they called them land army. They were helping to raise crops. Okay. They had, and here came a bunch of there was an old guy I know that came, and I'm bleeding all my head and all over because I'd been all cut up.
Right.
And he kept trying to get my clothes off of me, and I'm telling him, leave me alone. And he kept wanting, he wrapped my head around with a towel he brought. And he kept saying, you're in shock. Well, I'm sure I was. Okay. And finally, here came this British, they call it trucks, a lorry. Anyway,
Right.
this fellow had 4 pips or 3 on his shoulder, which I don't know, captain, I think, I don't know, British. and he had a couple of guys with him, and they loaded us on the truck and took us to his command post, which was not far away, which was a cow stable. Had been. And he had a bottle of booze that he handed to the first guy, and each guy took a pretty good swig. It went down the line till the last guy gave him the empty bottle. And then they took the three of us that had been cut all up, or I don't know how bad the other two guys were. Anyway, they took us to this little air sea rescue base hospital, which was just a house. And then I know I was put out. I don't even know how many days we were there.
Right. Do you have scars from that, or did it heal?
I have one little deal here. That's a lump that I think is scar tissue from that. Yeah. But most of it healed up.
Yeah.
Anyway, the other three were taken to a pub hotel, and I'm sure they were out too by daylight.
Yeah, that's nice.
And then a few days they flew a plane down and picked us up, and we were back in combat again.
Wow.
And flying missions. But that was my worst flight from the standpoint of that I was really, and it was the seventh mission.
Yeah. Why 73? Like if they said, oh, you're done after 35, you're done after 50, and then you're at 73, what happened?
Well, they started rotating people home.
Okay, so it just, you had been there long enough that
there were
they
a bunch
said,
of us that came.
Yeah.
I had one buddy that stayed. He was over there. He went over to France when they moved over there.
Okay.
And he was a close guy that I got to know real well. He was another navigator. Lived in Montana. Anyway.
So submarine watch. Sorry, I'd go back.
Well, anyway, the submarine, you'd be on a rotation to keep so they'd have you around the outside of the boat watching for submarines. Okay.
And you just see the little
4 hours
periscope?
at a time, probably.
Yeah.
That's what you'd be looking for, or our surface one. You might even find one at the surface.
Right.
Anyway, this group of guys said, "Oh no, we're not going to do that." The captain said, "That's fine. My orders are to transport you from Liverpool to New York." It didn't say anything about food. They decided they would do it. He endeared all of us to him, that captain. But anyway, and we were in a complete turn all the time on the boat. We flew up close to Iceland and close to Greenland and then into New York. But we were changing direction all the time. And we had everything full throttle. We were really going as fast as that boat would go.
Right.
But
to throw
we were doing everything, and by changing, you were changing directions,
Right.
As we did in flying, we did that on our combat missions.
Right.
Up until the actual IP, which means the initial point of a bomb run, to the IP, we were always changing something as a whole group. We were like a bunch of birds.
Right.
We'd be swinging to the right, and here the flak would be over here exploding.
And you just follow each other, or you would plan that ahead of time?
We were always as a group.
Right, but I mean, did you have coordinates where you were going to do that, or you just follow the lead plane when?
Well, you knew
or like there was a formation, you knew how it worked.
Intelligence would tell us the route. And I remember one deal we went into Paris, and they warned us coming back out, don't go over Boulogne, which was out on the coast there along in France. Don't go over there. It's heavily fortified. And so coming out, it was not fog, but it was hazy. You could see down.
Right.
But looking out, it was, with the sun on it, it looked like looking at ice, you might say.
Right.
So, but I took our group and missed Boulogne out south, and we're out now on the water looking back at the coast. And here came my buddy from Montana, and he was leading a group out. They got right over Boulogne, and the Germans waited till they were right over it.
No.
And that flak was so heavy, it was just solid black. They all got back, but they all had holes in their, and they didn't get hurt, fortunately. They didn't anybody get hurt, but they were lucky. But we were out there laughing at them. We thought,
they didn't get
look at those guys, how funny they are.
So when you got back to New York, and
Yeah.
were you done? Did you have to
No,
go back?
we
after
came
that?
back to, we got to New York, and that
How-
was great to see that
Yeah.
gal out there in the water.
Yeah,
Anyway, they put us on a train, and we went to St. Louis,
Mhm.
and there's where we picked up our stuff, and
Mhm.
we were given 30 days leave.
Mhm.
In 30 days to report to Miami, Florida, for reassignment.
Okay.
And I stooged around, bought a car, an old one, and I did go by to see my folks
Mhm.
in Missouri, and on down. I look back, I wish I'd spent more time with them. I didn't. I was running all over the country, and drove on down to Miami, and when I got there, it was a reassignment place, and it was. I asked them, "Do you have any job here?" And they said, "Sure, you can work here." Reassigning other people, all officers, from different things. So that's what I did for about 2 months, and then I couldn't hack that humidity. It was so humid. I wasn't used to it. So I looked and assigned myself. And it was to
So
a bond
perfect.
selling U.S., pushing war bonds out of Detroit. And each week, we'd go in Monday morning, and the local office there had set us up like noon today. You'll be talking before Kiwanis luncheon in this town. We were all over Michigan,
Right,
all
right.
over. And that went on for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months.
So did you ever think there was a chance that you would go to the Pacific?
Way back, if I'd been in the pilot, finished up in the class of 42G pilot training, okay, that bunch did go to the Pacific, and it was right when the the Japanese were really controlling the Pacific. And to my knowledge, most of them never made it back. At least not the ones I knew and was in training with.
Right.
None of them got back. They were all killed.
Right.
So my whole life has been what ifs. And one of them was, what if I had gone on with the pilot training? Even though it really bothered me that I didn't go on and get the full deal.
Right. And you're talking about when you became a navigator instead.
Yeah. But but things happened even in the war that.
Right, like if you had been leaning forward a little bit
Well,
more.
if I'd been leaning forward a little bit. That was a what if. Another one was on one of my last missions. We had Cherbourg, but not the actual harbor. And the Germans had some heavy guns up on the mountains above it, and would not let any ships of ours land there, because they had control of it with their guns. So I was leading, 18 planes to hit those guns emplacements. And in order to get to them again, because of the cloud deck, we were down around 5,000 feet.
Okay.
We had to go in over the back and approach it from the back, headed towards the guns on the beach, above the beach. And every correction I put into my bomb sight, the target would move. And it was frustrating, because I only had about 25 seconds on that bomb run, and I couldn't figure out what's wrong.
Right.
I didn't have time to figure it out because we were being shot at.
Yeah.
And but it kept moving me further from the target to the right, and the fellow on my left wing got hit, and that whole crew was killed. Okay? Somewhere I have a picture of that, because my Top Gunner took a picture of it, of them in plane. And where those bombs went, I don't know.
Right.
If I ever got back to France, that's one place I would like to go see and find out where did those bombs actually land.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we got back on the ground, I was with Frank, my guy I'd gone overseas with.
Mm-hmm.
Frank said to me, "What were you doing to me?" And I said, "Frank, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's go back up to the plane and see." Well, they had hooked the bomb sight up backwards. So every correction I put into it. But a what if that had, and I'm sorry they got killed, but it would have been us.
Yeah.
Because that's where we would have been.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, one of those what ifs in my life. I've often wondered, why am I having these things, what ifs happen?
Right. Well, that's fascinating.
Yeah. You wonder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like one time when we were training at Barksdale Field with my crew, and it was a training flight. We were to fly from Barksdale Field at Shreveport to Dallas and Fort Worth, and then up into Arkansas, and then back to the base.
Mm-hmm.
And I had pre-plotted everything, and I had taken into account all the things, drift, the wind pattern, and everything, and did a dumb thing. I called up to Frank and said, "This is the heading to fly, and this time of arrival, ETO, estimated time of arrival, will be," and I gave him the time. And then I went to the navigator's compartment, took out one of the magazines and started looking at the pictures, and there was my compass, which matched his. I didn't look at it. Mistake I learned real quick. This is my first navigation hop with Frank.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. At the end of the ETA,
Yeah.
estimated time of arrival, Frank says on the intercom, "I don't see anything." Well, maybe we drifted a little bit. Fly a circle. We flew circles, and we flew circles, and we flew more and bigger circles. Nothing on the ground. No railroad tracks, no towns, nothing. Nothing except mountains, sagebrush, or just brush down there. And it finally was starting to get dark. And Frank said, "Look, we only have so much flying time left.
Yeah.
What do you want me to do?" And I knew that we were west of the river that went between Shreveport and the Gulf. And I thought, well, if we can hit that river, so that's east, 90 degrees, Frank.
Right.
He whipped it to 90 degrees. We flew. It got dark. Got darker. Nothing. Not a light of any kind. Well, of course, they were having blackout. As you know, everything was blacked out. We had about 15 minutes of flying time left. Frank said, "Well, we got about 15 minutes of flying time left." So we all started thinking about bailing out.
Mm-hmm.
Out of the darkness came the whirling green and white light of the airfield. Barksdale Field, dead ahead of us. We landed, and we had about 5 minutes of gas left. We got on the ground. Frank said, "Let's see where you made a mistake." I said, "Frank, I did not make a mistake. I've been back over everything in my head and on paper. I know I'm right. I told you to fly this heading," whatever it was, I forget now. He flew 100 degrees different from what I told him. And as near as I can figure, we were somewhere down southern Texas near the border or over the border in old Mexico. And to this day, I ask myself, coincidence?
Yeah. That you ended up right back
That
in the...
90 degrees would bring us, no way, if that's where we were, that 90 degrees could bring us back here when it should be there for 90.
That's so...
Again,
yeah.
the what if.
Yeah, yeah. What happened after you were in Detroit? How did the war end for you?
The war ended for me that they terminated that, and I was sent to San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
I got there to San Antonio to that, I forget the name of the base now, and reported to the CO. He said, well, I don't know why you're here. And I said, I don't know why I'm here either. So I stayed there for about 3 days, and then I got orders to go to Midland, Texas.
Okay.
To the base there. And there I was doing ground school instructing on the Northern Bomb Site and bombing theory to, these were Navy fresh navigators.
Okay.
And then they transferred me to Victorville, California, where I was doing the same thing. In the meantime, I had gone to college with Mildred Inslee,
Okay.
who lived in Sacramento but had gone to Graceland College here in Iowa when I was there. Well, I knew she was from Sacramento. I made a phone call to Sacramento, and her mother said, oh, she's teaching in San Jose down at the south end of the bay, but she comes home on weekends. Why don't you come up? So I did. I took the train and went up there and got dating her, and we eventually got married. Then I went right into the reserves. And I went to San Jose and went to work for Pacific Gas and Electric. And then a year and a half later, we got married. And that's the story.
Well, wonderful. Thanks so much for telling us your war story and this.
There's a lot of others I could tell you.
I know. I mean, I'm sure it's a big experience.
My right side on tip here is a miniature of the Purple Heart, which because of that crash I was in, I did get the Purple Heart. There was no ceremony. As I recall, I still have the box it came in. I still have the original one. I think he just tossed it on the bed or handed it to me and I tossed it on the bed. Awards didn't mean, you didn't pay much attention to the ribbons. The one over on this other side, over here, the outside, is the Distinguished Flying Cross, the DFC it's called. And the one below that there is the Air Medal, and it seemed like ever so many missions they gave you an Air Medal, but after the first one you got little things that you could stick on your ribbon. They were kind of brass colored when they, for each one of those, and when you got 5 of those, you got one that was silver colored. That happens to be the engineer gunner and myself. I'm holding Jonesy, our dog that we picked up in Boston. It was a little Boston Terrier, just a little guy, and I kind of adopted him. Took him on a couple of missions and then decided it was too dangerous. And that's the picture of the crew after the co-pilot left. He did the painting on the plane, little Lulu, and also on all of our jackets. And I'm at the tall guy is Frank, the pilot, Frank Noyes, and standing to his right, in other words, I'm on the left side of the picture there, is me. The other side of Frank is the engineer gunner. And down below is the radio gunner and the gunner.
Wonderful.
So that's...
Well, Bob, thanks so much for coming in and telling us to shake hands and be professional. Thank you so much, and this has been a really, really, really wonderful story. You're a great storyteller.
Just between us, I wanted to add that every person in the service, it was his story. And they're all different.
Right.
Even everybody on that crew would tell you a different story.